Saturday, 22nd of January, 1944. Dear Kitty, I wonder whether you can tell me why it is that people always try so hard to hide their real feelings. How is it that I always behave quite differently from what I should in other people's company? Why do we trust one another so little? I know there must be a reason, but still I sometimes think it's horrible that you find you can never really confide in people, even in those who are nearest to you. It seems as if I've grown up a lot since my dream the other night. I'm much more of an independent being. You'll certainly be amazed when I tell you that even my attitude towards the Van Dans has changed. I suddenly see all the arguments and the rest of it in a different light, and am not as prejudiced as I was. How can I have changed so much? Yes, you see, it suddenly struck me that if Mummy had been different, a real mumsy, the relationship might have been quite different. It's true that Mrs. Van Daan is by no means a nice person, but still, I do think half the quarrels could be avoided if it weren't for the fact that when the conversation gets tricky, Mummy is a bit difficult too. Mrs. Van Daan has one good side, and that is that you can talk to her. Despite all her selfishness, stinginess, and underhandedness, you can make her give in easily, as long as you don't irritate her and get on the wrong side of her. This way doesn't work every time, but if you have patience, you can try again and see how far you get. All the problems of our upbringing, of our being spoiled, the food, it could have been quite different if we'd remained perfectly open and friendly, and not always on the lookout for something to seize on. I know exactly what you'll say, Kitty. But Anne, do these words really come from your lips? From you, who have had to listen to so many harsh words from the people upstairs? From you, the girl who has suffered so many injustices? And yet they come from me. I want to start afresh and try to get to the bottom of it all. Not be like the saying, the young always follow a bad example. I want to examine the whole matter carefully myself and find out what is true and what is exaggerated. Then, if I myself am disappointed in them, I can adopt the same line as Mummy and Daddy. If not, I shall try first of all to make them alter their ideas, and if I don't succeed, I shall stick to my own opinions and judgment. I shall seize every opportunity to discuss openly all our points of arguments with Mrs. Van Daan, and not be afraid of declaring myself neutral, even at the cost of being called a know-it-all. It is not that I shall be going against my own family, but from today there will be no more unkind gossip on my part. Until now I was immovable. I always thought the Van Daans were in the wrong, but we too are partly to blame. We have certainly been right over the subject matter, but handling of others from intelligent people, which we consider ourselves to be, one expects more insight. I hope that I have acquired a bit of insight and will use it well when the occasion arises. Yours, Anne. Monday, 24th of January, 1944. Dear Kitty, something has happened to me, or rather, I can hardly describe it as an event, except that I think it is pretty crazy. Whenever anyone used to speak of sexual problems at home or at school, it was something either mysterious or revolting. Words which had any bearing on the subject were whispered, and often if someone didn't understand, he was laughed at. It struck me as a very odd, and I thought, why are people so secretive and tiresome when they talk about these things? But as I didn't think that I could change things, I kept my mouth shut as much as possible, and sometimes asked girlfriends for information. When I had learned quite a lot and had also spoken about it with my parents, Mummy said one day, Anne, let me give you some good advice. Never speak about this subject to boys, and don't reply if they begin about it. I remember exactly what my answer was. I said, no, of course not. The very idea, and there it remained. When we first came here, Daddy often told me about things that I would really have preferred to hear from Mummy, and I found out the rest from books and things I picked up from conversations. Peter Van Daan was never as tiresome over this as the boys at school. Once or twice, at first perhaps, but he never tried to get me talking. Mrs. Van Daan told us that she had never talked about these things to Peter, and for all she knew, neither had her husband. Apparently, she didn't even know how much he knew. Yesterday, when Margot, Peter, and I were peeling potatoes, somehow the conversation turned to Boshi. "We still don't know what sex Boshi is, do we?" I asked. "Yes, certainly," Peter answered. "He's a tom." I began to laugh. "A tomcat? That's expecting. That's marvelous." Peter and Margot laughed too over this silly mistake. You see, 2 months ago, Peter had stated that Boshi would soon be having a family. Her tummy was growing visibly. However, the fatness appeared to come from the many stolen bones, because the children didn't seem to grow fast, let alone make their appearance. Peter just had to defend himself. "No," he said, "you can go with me yourself to look at him. Once, when I was playing around with him, I noticed quite clearly that he's a tom." I couldn't control my curiosity, and went with him to the warehouse. Boshi, however, was not receiving visitors, and was nowhere to be seen. We waited for a while, began to get cold, and went upstairs again. Later in the afternoon I heard Peter go downstairs for the second time. I mustered up all my courage to walk through the silent house alone, and reached the warehouse. Boshi stood on the packing table playing with Peter, who had just put him on the scales to weigh him. "Hello, do you want to see him?" He didn't make any lengthy preparations, but picked up the animal, turned him over onto his back, deftly held his head and paws together, and the lesson began. "These are the male organs. These are just a few stray hairs, and that is his bottom." The cat did another half turn and was standing on his white socks once more. If any other boy had shown me the male organs, I would have never looked at him again. But Peter went on talking quite normally on what is otherwise such a painful subject, without meaning anything unpleasant, and finally put me sufficiently at my ease for me to be normal too. We played with Boshi, amused ourselves, chattered together, and then sauntered through the large warehouse towards the doors. Usually, when I want to know something, I find it in some book or other. Don't you?" I asked. "Why on earth? I just ask upstairs. My father knows more than me, and has had more experiences in such things." We were already on the stairs, so I kept my mouth shut after that. Things may alter. As Bear Rabbit said, "Yes, really, I shouldn't have discussed these things in such a normal way with a girl. I know too definitely that Mummy didn't mean it that way when she warned me not to discuss the subject with boys." I wasn't quite my usual self for the rest of the day, though, in spite of everything. When I thought over our talk, it seemed rather odd, but at least I'm wiser about one thing, that there really are young people, and of the opposite sex too, who can discuss these things naturally without making fun of them. I wonder if Peter really does ask his parents much. Would he honestly behave with them as he did with me yesterday? Ah, what would I know about it? Yours, Anne. Thursday, 27th of January, 1944. Dear Kitty, lately I have developed a great love for family trees and genealogical tables of the royal families, and have come to the conclusion that once you begin, you want to delve still deeper into the past and can keep on making fresh and interesting discoveries. Although I am extraordinarily industrious over my lessons, and can already follow the English home service quite well on the wireless, I still devote many Sundays to sorting and looking over my large collection of film stars, which is quite a respectable size by now. I am awfully pleased whenever Mr. Crawler brings the cinema and theater with him on Mondays. Although this little gift is often called a waste of money by the less worldly members of the household, they are amazed each time at how accurately I can state who is in a certain film even after a year. Eli, who, on her days off, often goes to the movies with her boyfriend, tells me the titles of the names of the stars who appear in them. Together with that, the reviews say. Not so long ago, Mum said that I wouldn't need to go to a cinema later on because I knew the plots, the names of the stars, and the opinions of the reviews all by heart. If I ever come sailing in with a new hairstyle, they all look disapprovingly at me, and I can be quite sure that someone will ask which glamorous star I'm supposed to be imitating. They only half believe me if I reply that it is my own invention. But to continue about the hairstyle, it doesn't say put more than half an hour. Then I'm so tired of the Remarks people pass that I quickly hasten to the bathroom and restore my ordinary house garden kitchen hairstyle. Yours, Anne. Friday, 28th of January, 1944. Dear Kitty, I asked myself this morning whether you don't sometimes feel rather like a cow who has had to chew over all the old pieces of news again and again, and who finally yawns loudly and silently wishes that Anne would occasionally dig up something new. Alas, I know it's dull for you, but try to put yourself in my place, and imagine how sick I am of the old cows who keep having to be pulled out of the ditch again. If the conversation at meal times isn't over politics or a delicious meal, then Mummy or Mrs. Van Daan trout out one of the old stories of their youth, which we've heard so many times before. Or Dussel twaddles about his wife's extensive wardrobe, beautiful race horses, leaking rowboats, boys who can swim at the age of 4, muscular pains and nervous patience. What it all boils down to is this, that if one of the 8 of us opens his mouth, the other 7 can finish the story for him. We all know the points of every joke from the start, and the storyteller is alone in laughing at his witticisms. The various milkmen, grocers, and butchers of the 2 ex-housewives have already grown beards in our minds. So often they have been praised to the skies or pulled to pieces, it is impossible for anything in the conversation here to be fresh or new. Still, all this would be bearable if the grown-ups didn't have their little way of telling the stories, with which Kufus and Hank or Miep obliged the company, 10 times over, and adding their own little frills and furbelows, so that I often have to pinch my arm under the table to prevent myself from putting them right. Little children such as Anne must never, under any circumstances, know better than the grown-ups, however many blunders they make, and to whatever extent they allow their imaginations to run away with them. One favorite subject of Kufus and Hank's is that of people in hiding and in the underground movement. They know very well that anything to do with other people in hiding interests us tremendously, and how deeply we can sympathize with the suffering of people who get taken away and rejoice with the liberated prisoner. We are quite as used to the idea of going into hiding or underground as in bygone days one was used to Daddy's bedroom slippers warming in front of the fire. There are a great number of organizations, such as the Free Netherlands, which forge identity cards, supply money to people underground, find hiding places for people, and work for young men in hiding. And it is amazing how much noble, unselfish work these people are doing, risking their own lives to help and save others. Our helpers are a very good example. They have pulled us through up till now, and we hope they will bring us safely to dry land. Otherwise, they will have to share the same fate as the many others who are being searched for. Never have we heard one word of the burden which we certainly must be to them. Never has one of them complained of all the trouble we give. They all come upstairs every day, talk to the men about business and politics, to the women about food and wartime difficulties, and about newspapers and books with the children. They put on the brightest possible faces, bring flowers and presents for birthdays and bank holidays, are always ready to help and do all they can. That is something we must never forget. Although others may show heroism in the war or against the Germans, our helpers display heroism in their cheerfulness and affection. The wildest tales are going around, but still they are usually founded on fact. For instance, Kufus told us this week that in the Gelderland 2 football 11s met, and one side consisted solely of members of the underground, and the other was made up of members of the police. New ration books are being handed out in Hilversum. In order that the many people in hiding may also draw rations, the officials have given instructions to those of them in the districts to come at a certain time so that they can collect their documents from a separate little table. Still, they'll have to be careful that such impudent tricks do not reach the ears of the Germans. Yours, Anne.